Welcome to Bankole's Nation. I'm your host, Bankole Thompson. In this week's episode of our podcast, we're speaking with Republican Tom Leonard, the former Speaker of the Michigan House of Reps. He just recently dropped out of the race for governor. We're talking gubernatorial politics, all coming up on this week's episode. Stay with us right after this break. All right, let's bring in Tom Leonard, former Michigan Republican House Speaker, who recently decided not to pursue his 2026 gubernatorial ambition. He was one of the candidates running for governor of Michigan. Tom, thank you for being here.
Hey, my friend, happy to be here. It's an honor.
Well, I want to start with you dropping out of the race. Widely reported, of course, I wrote a column about it as well in my Detroit News column. You talked about the fact that you wanted to remain who you are, and you were not going to change who you are to become the next governor of Michigan. And let me say, I've talked to some Democrats who actually took your candidacy seriously.
Yeah, and let me go a step back when
Right.
to answer this question fully. But so I was very clear on the campaign trail when we got in this race. We were one of the later entries. And the reason we got in when we did was I was really looking to see, I mean, as you know, our state has a whole host of problems. 74% of our fourth graders can't read at a proficient level, bottom five for unemployment, bottom 10 for income growth. I mean, the list goes on. And what I wanted to see was a candidate that was going to wake up every single day, putting a bold, transparent vision, attacking problems on the table. And I wasn't seeing that. So we got in the race, and that's what I did. I focused on problems. That's what we focused on every day. And as it went on, it was very interesting. When we would go into a room and we would talk about these solutions that we had to problems,
Right.
we could win the room. The problem was being able to get that statewide momentum that we needed. And frankly, I learned very quickly. I think we had a very strong message. The problem was we didn't have the $8 to $10 million a month to put behind it like a Perry Johnson did. We didn't have the 98% name ID the way John James did. So we had a challenge, and we had to make a decision. Were we going to continue to focus on issues and likely not get our message out because we didn't have the money, or was I going to start doing vicious attacks, and was I going to turn into social media theater instead of focusing on issues to really try to draw attention to our campaign? I wasn't willing to do it. That was not me being true to who I was. And frankly, we thought the best thing for us was to step aside at that point.
What has been the reception among your supporters and others since you dropped out of the race for governor?
It has been wonderful. I will tell you, I think most of our supporters are in the same boat that Janelle and you're often going to hear me say we, because it was certainly a team effort, a family decision. And most all of them supported the decision that we made. They understood it. They got it. And I've been very frank about this. It wasn't the decision that we wanted to make, but I know in my heart of hearts that it was the right decision. And most all of my supporters, they've been very supportive of it. And frankly, I think we got out the right way. I think we did it the right way. People know that our hearts were in the right place. And I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to be out there every day bringing attention to these issues. And frankly, I think the campaign was a huge success in that respect. I mean, hardly any of these candidates were talking about data centers before we got in the race. I started hitting that issue hard. Folks started talking about it. In fact, when we got the day after we got out of the race was they had the press association forum, and that was the main issue or main topic coming out of that forum. Very few candidates were talking about mental health. We brought a huge, we talked about that issue repeatedly. So there were a lot of big issues I think we brought attention to by being in the race.
So mental health, data centers, those are two issues that crosses urban and rural
Yeah.
Michigan. They impacted, of course, tied to inequality and poverty and so forth. Now that you're out of the race, people are telling me the choices of candidates that we have, there's really not much there. Most of them, if not 95% or 98% of them, I'm just going to put it on the table, are Trumpian minted candidates. They're using Donald Trump's talking points on the campaign trail. I think what stood out for your campaign for a lot of people, even Democrats that I talked to, was that you were not repeating Donald Trump's talking points on the campaign. Talk about the challenge that you see or the opportunity that you see that Republicans face moving ahead. Escalating gas prices are up.
Yep.
Donald Trump's popularity is going down. The poll numbers don't look good. How do you run a campaign, not only embracing Trump, but almost sounding like a Trump Jr., repeating every Trump-like phrase on the campaign trail?
So, it's interesting you asked that question, and I've been very transparent about, the entire Trump situation
Right.
being in this primary. And I said this at a debate, and I was very clear, and I don't know why candidates don't understand this, and that is when it comes to Republican politics, Donald Trump is the Michael Jordan. Okay, so you look at the NBA for the last 30 years. They've tried to find the next Michael Jordan. They tried it with Kobe. They failed. They tried it with LeBron. They failed. At some point, the NBA is going to have to figure out that there is only one Michael Jordan. He did it his way. They broke the mold when he left, and there's only going to be one. And that's what I've tried explaining to people is, listen, you can support the president without being him because, frankly, there is only one. There is only one person that can say some of the things that Donald Trump does, that can do it his way. And frankly, anybody else that tries to be him, I think your general public, your general voter out there, they see them as being pretenders. So for me, I was going to be Tom Leonard. I wasn't going to be out there trying to be anybody that I wasn't. And I've been very clear. It's interesting. I think because of the way that I treat people, being respectful, focused on issues, I think many people saw us being the quote unquote moderate in the race. And you look at some of my issues that I was focused on, I believe I was the conservative. I mean, I was the only one that was saying that I believe we ought to have vaccine choice in this state, that the government shouldn't be able to force a vaccine on you. I was the only one willing to take on the utilities and calling on more energy choice. A lot of these issues, I brought a lot of attention to these Second Amendment issues that many of these other candidates didn't simply want to talk about. But again, it's about being respectful. It's about being true to who you are. That's what we did. And again, when it comes to the president, there's only one. Only he can say and do some of the things that he does. You got to be your own person. And that's what these candidates on the Republican side of the aisle, that's what they've got to understand.
And I want to explore that with the Republican candidates here. Now that you're out of the fray, but you're still involved, standing on the sidelines and speaking to these issues, is how do we have intelligent conversations without making it look as if, people in Detroit ought to be thought of as something else, without making it look as if a certain community that is not lily white ought to be viewed in a certain way that is not pleasant to the eye or that is not acceptable in the mainstream? How do we have, conversations that are intelligent where we're able to, state our own positions? Like, you and I are talking now without being viewed as if, either Tom is the enemy or Bankole is the enemy or somebody else is the enemy. How do we have that conversation? Because when I look at the Republican field of candidates, I don't have much assurance. I'm going to be honest with you, and I know they'll be listening to this podcast. I don't have much assurance that, we have candidates who are principled, who can go into a room of people who don't see eye to eye with them and have a healthy dialogue.
Well, we have to. And that's what I always said on the campaign trail. I was willing to go anywhere at any time, any place, and talk to anybody about these issues because I felt so strongly with them. And I will tell you, when it comes to, for instance, like school choice, I am a huge school choice person. I believe in empowering and trusting parents over the government any day. And I will tell you, most of the time where that would be the most received typically was in the urban areas. When I would meet with single mothers who either could not afford to send their child to a private school or they couldn't afford to quit their job and homeschool their child, they would ask the question, why don't I have the same choices and options for my kid as somebody in Birmingham or somebody in Grand Blanc if you were talking to a mother in Flint? As a conservative, I was not afraid to go out there and talk about these issues. When it comes to, law enforcement in defunding the police, and I was always very transparent about this. I always found it very interesting that you would get these people from the suburbs where there wasn't a lot of crime, or some of them lived in gated communities, that would come into these urban areas and start demanding that we defund the police, and then walk out and leave these areas where there's high crime. The people I talk to, they want police on the street. So again, I just think, for me as a conservative, and I've said this to my fellow conservatives, you got to be willing to take this message anywhere, any place, anytime. That's what I've always done, and that's what we did on the campaign trail.
Well, I think part of the challenge would be in this era is how you redefine conservatism
That's true.
in the Trump era. It's almost as if there's an entire scholarship that needs to be built around that because, and of course, there's a lot we can take from the current crop of candidates. I want to move. I'm going to come back to the Republican
And you
field.
know, and I
Sure,
was just going to say something real quick. I mean,
sure.
you know, you have to always be willing to talk to folks because I'm telling you, there is so much more that unites us than what divides us. I mean, listen, when I was a House Speaker, one of my number one priorities was to get rid of driver responsibility fees. I mean, when I was a prosecutor, I saw that we had the dumbest law on the books that had
Right.
prevented 350,000 people from having driver's licenses, 75,000 of them in the city of Detroit. And guess what? I found a champion and a friend in Sylvia Santana, who lives in Detroit, on that issue. And she was our bill sponsor. I was the speaker that was pushing it, and we got it done. Sylvia and I probably don't agree on a lot of issues, but that was one. We were friends. We treated each other with respect. We trusted each other. We got something good done for the state because we were willing to have those conversations.
No, and you know, and that is important. I think it's missing in the gubernatorial race. You know, and I've mentioned this publicly before. You know, Governor Rick Snyder, former Republican Governor Rick Snyder, and I did not see eye to eye on a number of issues. But I remember one time when I invited him over to my house for dinner for a reception, and he had just gotten out of surgery, and he came. You know, and he came and he met people who were very critical of him. He met people who believed in his agenda, and he met people who were sitting on the fence. And we had a real dialogue. And he made it clear. I remember that evening, Saturday evening, he made it clear that I was very critical of him, and that but he wasn't going to run away from my invitation, you know, and so forth. And we had that dialogue. And I think I shared with you the late Republican Paul Welde. You know, Paul Welde
Yep.
and I did not see eye to eye, but Paul Welde and I were very good friends. We used to meet every other month at the Click restaurant in downtown Detroit on East Jefferson, just to have a dialogue and talk. I mean, he was a preeminent member of the Republican Party. But again, we're in an era, in this Trump era, where if you don't believe in certain ideas, you are the enemy, you are the devil, and so forth. And I think when some people look at the current field of Republican candidates, they say, well, Bankole, you know, there's really not much hope there. I want to move quickly to the Democratic field, though.
Yes.
Jocelyn Benson, the current Secretary of State, is going to likely become the next Democratic nominee for governor. So she's going to be the standard bearer, the flag bearer for the Democratic Party. Independent and former Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan is out there. Also trying to capitalize, hopefully, on the weaknesses of Republicans and Democrats to inch in to become the next governor. What's your take on the governor's race on the Democratic side now that you're
I
out
mean,
of this race?
Yeah, I mean, I think you just hit the nail on the head. I mean, I believe Jocelyn Benson will be the nominee. I don't see how it's going to be anybody else. And listen, Chris Swanson, who's running, is a dear friend of mine. I have known him for 30 years. I was a prosecutor in Flint. He worked for
Right.
the sheriff's department. He's been dear friends with our family, but I'm going to be honest about it. I don't see how he beats her. She is going to be the nominee. And I think it's going to be incumbent on Republicans, and that's why I believe it's so important to focus on these issues. I know Kamala Harris talked about this a lot when she was running for president, and that is going out there and prosecuting your case. And again, there are a lot of challenges facing this state that I don't believe Jocelyn Benson is going to want to defend. Will that Republican candidate go out there and focus on those issues and those challenges, or are they going to focus on petty attacks? If they focus on the first, I believe they can be successful. If they focus on the second, Jocelyn Benson's going to be the next governor of the state of Michigan.
If you look at the current crop of Republican candidates who are running based on their performance so far, is there anybody in that field that you think can match Jocelyn Benson should she become the Democratic nominee?
Yeah, I mean, right now, I think the jury's out. I mean, we have not seen every candidate yet on the
Right.
debate stage. I would like to see that happen. But again, it's going to be the candidate that's going to focus on these issues. What are you going to do to make certain that our kids can read? What are you going to do to grow this economy? What are you going to do? I mean, we've got to figure out something with property taxes and property tax relief. We can't be having seniors lose their forever homes because they can't keep up with their property taxes. These are the issues that they've got to focus on.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I hear you. Let's talk about the independent, Mike Duggan.
Yeah.
Do you dismiss him? Do you think he presents a formidable challenge in this race for governor? I mean, the regional chamber poll that came out this week showed that he's losing points behind
Yeah.
John James and Jocelyn Benson. Jocelyn Benson is leading that poll.
Listen,
Do you
I've been very
underestimate Duggan?
Yeah, so he should not be underestimated. Okay, let me be very clear about that. I've worked with him when I was speaker and he was the mayor of Detroit. He is not to be underestimated. He's one of the smartest people that I've ever been in a room with when it comes to being a politician in politics. But I said out of the gate when he got into this race that I think ultimately he will, if he sees this through, the ultimate numbers will be high single digits. I think he's going to get 8, 9%, maybe 11 or 12. Okay. And I'm not coming off of that just because I know how difficult it is for an independent to win in this type of environment. And I was working with Bill Stepien, uh, President Trump's former campaign manager, one of the best in the business, one of the smartest guys that I know. And my numbers might be a little bit off here, but they're going to be close enough to be dangerous. But what he had shown is I think there have been, I think it's 590 something gubernatorial races in the history of our country. And I think there's only been 6 situations where an independent won, and never in a state that had straight party ticket voting. And what happens is you just don't have that infrastructure there. But second, as you get closer, and I think we're starting to see this with Duggan and the polls as we get closer to November, you get a lot of people who may want to see an independent, they may want to Mike Duggan, but ultimately they're not going to throw away their vote. And what you see is this big drop off. And I think that's what you're going to have happen with him. Now, the other thing I'll say about Mike Duggan is this. I personally have not seen him truly separate himself from the Democratic Party. The only thing that he has said is I'll work with Republicans or I don't hate Donald Trump. I have not seen him put one core issue on the table where he says, you know what, this is an area where I am different from Democrats. I mean, I'll give you a prime example would be the tax credit that was just recently signed, the federal law tax credit that Governor Whitmer has not signed up for yet. This is one, obviously, it's very partisan because, it was a Donald Trump initiative. You've got Republicans supporting it. Democrats generally don't. This would be a key issue. And this is an issue where 72% of Michiganders support Michigan opting into this credit, 79% of Democrats. Why wouldn't Mike Duggan come out and say, you know what, this is why I'm different. I'm putting party politics aside. If I was governor, I would opt into this tax credit. I don't care whose name is on it. But he hasn't done that yet.
So you question his independent credentials.
Listen, I've been very transparent. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I think this is somebody who woke up one day, he did the calculation, he realized it was going to be very difficult for him to beat Jocelyn Benson in a primary, and he went with his plan B. I don't think it's going to work. Again, I'll go back to what I said. I will not underestimate the man, but I do not see him being the next governor of the state of Michigan.
But there's also the elephant in the room here, Detroit, the vote in Detroit. Jocelyn Benson must be able to overwhelmingly win Detroit to become the next governor, right?
Yes.
To compensate for certain parts of the state. Oakland County, that depends on who you ask. Mike Duggan is a very popular mayor. He's very popular in the suburbs. So, and he was the mayor of Detroit, a 3-term mayor in Detroit. He can walk the streets of Detroit. He knows a lot of places in the city that he has a support even of the black ministers in Detroit. And these are people that some of them were allies of Jocelyn Benson, like Reverend Wendell Anthony.
I was going to say, yeah, he's got Wendell Anthony. Yep.
Yeah, who president of the Detroit NAACP. Now, Wendell Anthony will tell you, Jocelyn Benson is, and this is me paraphrasing, is almost like, a political goddaughter of you will of Wendell Anthony, and I remember several years ago in 2011, 2012, myself, Jocelyn Benson, Michael Eric Dyson were honored by the NAACP at their Freedom Fund dinner back in 2012, 2011. So Jocelyn Benson is very close to Wendell Anthony, but Wendell Anthony did not mind, as he always does, to cross carpet and say, I'm going with Mike Duggan, I'm not going with Jocelyn Benson. I know that probably must have been politically painful for Jocelyn Benson. But my point here is to drive this home, and that is, if Duggan were to get a lot of significant votes out of Detroit, in his campaign in his campaign as an independent candidate for governor. That makes it difficult for Jocelyn Benson. Your guys in the Republican Party will be smiling.
Oh, listen, there is no, I mean, I'm not going to insult anybody's intelligence by saying that Duggan does not impact Democrats in this November election. I mean, he's a lifelong Democrat. This was somebody who
Yeah.
chaired Joe Biden's reelection efforts. Okay. So there is no doubt if he's going to pull votes, more of them are likely going to come from the Democratic side of the aisle. The question becomes this: his supporters like a Wendell Anthony, the Reverend Wendell Anthony, when October hits, if it's clear that Mike Duggan does not have a chance, do his supporters stick with him, or do they come to him, sit him down, and say, "Listen, we're going to have to do a pivot here because it's clear you're not going to be successful in November"? I don't know what they do. The jury's out on that, but I
Right.
think that's ultimately the question.
But is that something that is hopeful? Is that a scenario that Republicans are looking for? Because that is another scenario where if John James were to be the nominee, John James could win. If that were to be the case, Democrats suffer from a split that was created by a Mike Duggan candidacy.
Yeah, I mean, I think this gubernatorial race could be very close. And this could be a situation with Mike Duggan being on the ballot. You could see a Republican become the next governor of the state of Michigan with 43, 44% of the vote versus 47 or 48. As long as Mike Duggan stays in this race, whoever the next governor is, I believe they will become the next governor with a much smaller vote or percentage vote than
Right.
any governor we've seen in the last 20 years.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about John James. He's been missing in a number of forums that you took part in when you were running for governor, and he's been slammed publicly for not participating in these forums. Is it a question where John James feels like, look, I got this in the bag. I'm running with it. I am not going down in the stratosphere.
That's a question you would have to ask him. I don't know
But
the answer
what's
to
your
that.
take, though? What's your take?
Yeah,
If you were in his position, yeah.
yeah. So my take is this. When I look at a John James, a couple of those candidates that are in the race, frankly, and you saw it, I mean, they just got vicious with their attacks. And I think the question that John James probably, again, I have no intel on this, but the question he
Right.
probably had to ask himself was, am I going to sit there for an hour and a half and just let two of them just, bring relentless attack after relentless attack because I'm up by 20 points in the polls? And it was probably a calculated decision that he made. And frankly, politically, it may have been the right one. I don't know. The jury's going to be out. But, thankfully, it sounds like he did sign up for a couple debates. My understanding is there's a homeschool forum this Saturday that he's supposed to be at. So, again, that's a question you have to ask him. But again, I would ask the same question to myself. If I'm up by 20 points, am I going to sit there and just take these nonstop, relentless attacks? I think that's the calculation he made.
Yeah. So when you look at the current field of Republican candidates, and this is my assessment, it's subjective, it's my opinion, there doesn't seem to be a strong candidate in the GOP side who has crossover appeal.
That's always something they can pivot, they can work on in August once they become the nominee. I mean, I think it's very clear at this point. This has become a two-person race in the primary, maybe three-person race. I think, you've got Perry Johnson who's going to be able to spend unlimited money. You've got John, again, the
He
front
has
runner.
a lot
Not
of
the name
money. We need to recommend
Yep,
that he
yep.
sets up a foundation and help folks in Detroit and Benton Harbor. But go ahead.
Yep, and then maybe Mike Cox. But I think this is ultimately going to be it's ultimately going to be a three-person race. But I do believe there will be time in August once that person becomes the nominee to, start crossing over to the other side, start hitting those independents, start talking to them. And again, but if they're going to do it, they're going to have to, again, they're going to have to prosecute that case, and they're going to have to make Jocelyn Benson answer really tough questions. And I think ultimately for her, the question is going to be, you may recall, and I actually think the biggest, the death knell to her coffin, if you will, for Harris was when she was on The View. And you remember she got that question, is there anything that you would do different from Joe Biden? And the answer was, I can't think of anything right now. And
Yeah.
I think ultimately Jocelyn Benson's going to have to answer that question. Is there anything you would do differently than what Gretchen Whitmer has done over the last 8 years. And it'll be interesting to see how she answers that question.
Well, that's a great question. I think that's a it's a make or break question for a lot of politicians, including Democrats and Republicans. Let's look back at your gubernatorial campaign here. If you were to relive the entire campaign, are there things that you would do differently?
No, there's minor things, but I don't know that there's any one thing we could have done differently that was ultimately going to change the outcome of the race. I mean, again, once when Perry Johnson got in the race and started spending the amount of money that he was spending, it was clear it was going to become a two-person race. And again, for us to have a very narrow path, and I think there could have been a narrow path, as I mentioned, I was going to have to become something that I wasn't. And that was I was going to have to go to full-blown social media theater, not talking about the issues, but doing the name calling, the petty attacks, getting really nasty. And again, ultimately, I wanted my kids to look back at our campaign and say, this is something, I'm proud of my dad. And even though we had to get out early, I still believe 10, 15, 20 years from now, my kids are going to look back and they're going to be proud of what their dad did.
You don't want them to look back and say, my dad was trying to act like Donald Trump.
I don't want them to say that their dad became something he wasn't. And again,
Right.
I've been very clear again about the president. He is a person of one. Anybody that
Right.
tries to be him or act like him, they're a pretender. I'm not going to pretend like I'm anybody that I'm not, whether that's Donald Trump or any other candidate that's out there.
Let me ask you this as we round up this interview. I know it's an obvious question, but do you have some of these Republican candidates reaching out to you for your support?
We have, so I will tell you, I won't get into names, but all but two is very interesting. All but two of the statewide candidates, and I mean for Senate or governor,
Right.
all reached out in a very kind, generous, nice way. Hey, if it was a Democrat, may not have agreed with you on the issues, but you stuck with the issues, and I think you ought to be happy or proud of the type of campaign you ran. I have had a couple of the Republicans have reached out. They have asked for support. I had a couple others reach out, and they just it was just a soft text. They didn't ask for support, but I have had two have reached out and asked for support.
Mike Rogers, the Republican, of course, candidate for U.S. Senate, has said that we'll just be fine when it comes to the escalating or the spike in gas prices and so forth, almost hitting almost $6 in some places around the nation. You think he's set to become the next U.S. Senator?
I think Mike Rogers has a very good chance of becoming the next U.S. Senator. I mean, look at the polling that just came out yesterday that has him a couple points up. Okay. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
the numbers are what they are. Mike has a field essentially cleared right now. He's able to fundraise. He's able to go out there and run a general election campaign. He's working hard. He has a very strong chance of becoming the state's next U.S. Senator. But, Republicans are going to have to start focusing on affordability, and the president in DC, they are going to have to do something about these gas prices. It's going to be very difficult if gas is $5 a gallon going into November. And we as a party, we need to realize that. We need to understand this. I mean, you look at what just happened in Saginaw County in this special election.
Yeah.
Jason Tunney, the Republican. So this was a case where Kamala Harris won the district by 1%. And Shedrick just won the special election. The Democrat just won it by nearly 20 points. And I'm going to tell you, Jason Tunney, the Republican, he was a good candidate. He's got great pedigree, great background. He was working hard. He was articulate. He performed well at debates. There was no scandal involved, but the environment was just tough that particular night. And again, politics, I tell people 24 hours is an eternity in politics. So the environment definitely can bounce back for Republicans, but these gas prices, they're not helping.
Yeah, yeah. I saw that race, and the widening margin itself was unbelievable, given that Kamala Harris just barely won that district itself. And then, of course, Democrats are saying that this is a harbinger for things to come. This is what it's going to look like headed into November.
Yeah, and I don't know that I would necessarily say that again. 24 hours is an eternity in politics, and I truly cannot repeat that enough. I mean, listen, when Harris jumped on the ballot a couple of years ago, you may recall. I mean, she raised more money than any candidate had
She
ever
did.
raised in a week period. I mean, I think she darn near raised. I mean, it was hundreds of millions of dollars she was raising, and I remember polling. People were sending me national trends. They had her up 8, 9 points, and I had people texting me saying this thing's over. And I've said, guys, it's early September. We've got a long way to go.
Right.
Anything could change. And Donald Trump wound up winning every single swing state across the board. So again, we've got a long way to go. Republicans, but Republicans are going to have to go out there. They're going to have to talk about kitchen table issues. And again, they on the Republican side, they are definitely going to have to prosecute their case against Jocelyn Benson and make her answer or defend, the Whitmer administration over the last 8 years.
Well, the analogy you gave with Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris, is also the reason why, Tom, I'm very skeptical. I'm very skeptical about these poll numbers, because some of these polling have also in the past told us that, Kamala Harris was defeating Donald Trump in Michigan, that Hillary Clinton was wiping out Donald Trump in Michigan, and he came back and he won both against both of them in the same state. So I'm very critical of these polls that are coming out here. So I saw the regional chamber poll yesterday, Jocelyn Benson leading. Now it's good news for Democrats, but I'm not going to bet on that poll, because the best poll is on election day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, and I agree with you. I mean, you remember, I can't remember the lady's name, but the pollster out of Iowa, or the one that did the polling in Iowa, if you may recall, she's like one of like 3 A+ pollsters across the country. I think she had Harris winning Iowa by 4 or 5 points, and Trump won it by, I think, low double digits. I mean, that poll was 12, 15 points off. So you're absolutely right. The only poll that matters is the one on election day.
Yeah, yeah. Final comments for Republicans who are watching you, the candidates who are running now for governor, and what do you think they need to do specifically to prosecute the case against Democrats?
Listen, I have been very clear, and I am not getting off of this message. I truly believe right now, again, when you look at the reading crisis that we have in this state, the high property taxes, the fact we're bottom 5 for unemployment, bottom 10 for income growth, the fact that we're 800 primary care physicians short, the fact that a third of our counties are considered maternity deserts. They don't even have a OBGYN to deliver a baby. We have a mental health crisis. What I've been very clear about is this: the challenges that Michigan faces right now are greater than any one person running for office on either side of the aisle. I believe if Republicans nominate a candidate that is willing to go out there every single day and focus on real solutions, facing the problems to address these problems that Michigan has, I believe they can be successful in November. If their only focus is how much they hate Gretchen Whitmer or Jocelyn Benson, they're going to wind up just like the Democrats were 2 years ago, when their only focus was hatred of one person. They lose. They got to go out there every single day. They got to prosecute that case, and they got to focus on addressing problems every day. That's how they win.
And finally, Democrats are saying that they have the higher ground here, because the candidates running for governor, whether it's Mike Cox, Nesbitt, or any of those other candidates, Perry Johnson, John James, they're not offering anything to the escalating gas prices. They've not said anything. These candidates are not explaining how you deal with the affordability crisis. Is it a question of whether they're afraid of Donald Trump, or what is it? What do you think it is? And Democrats are saying we have a high ground on this issue, and we think we can beat whoever the Republican nominee is in November for governor.
Frankly, there is very little that on the state level that you can do to impact gas prices. I mean, frankly,
well, you can speak about it. You can speak about it.
No, absolutely. They've got to speak about it. And I think the answer is going to be, it's going to say, listen, there is very little we can do, but what we can do is we can put more money in your pockets. And that's why we need property tax relief immediately. That's why we've got to lower your energy costs that you're sending to DTE and consumers every month. And again, they cannot be afraid to take on the utilities. I'm going to tell you right now, as I travel the state, one of the biggest issues I heard about was people are fed up with paying some of the highest electricity rates across the country. We cannot have candidates that are afraid to take on the utilities. They've got to be willing to do that. And I think that's the answer. I think they got to be very transparent. They've got to be honest with the voters. Listen, I can't do a lot right now to bring down your gas prices, but what I can do, I can put more money in your pockets through electricity rates, through insurance costs, property taxes. Those are the things that I'm going to focus on. And I think they've got to be honest and transparent with the voters of the state.
And you need candidates, Republican candidates, who are also not afraid of disagreeing with President Donald Trump publicly.
No, listen, if it doesn't matter who the person is. I mean, I've been very clear. My wife and I, we don't agree 100% of the time. You just got to stay true to yourself. You got to stay true to the issues that you care about. And if you differ with anybody, whether that be the president, the governor, the mayor, I don't care who it is, you just got to be transparent. You got to be real. People want authenticity. I'll be clear. I believe one of the reasons Donald Trump got elected twice, especially the first time, I truly believe was his authenticity. I believe there were a lot of people that looked at him and they didn't necessarily agree with him on every issue. They didn't necessarily agree with the way that he came off, but they did see him as authentic. And I think that's one of the reasons why he was successful. I think you're seeing the same thing right now in California with Spencer Pratt. Look at the energy around him right now. I wouldn't be surprised if this guy doesn't become the next mayor of LA because he's being authentic. These candidates got to be true to themselves.
All right. Thank you so much, Tom Leonard, for being here.
Hey, thank you. Appreciate it. Look forward to the next time.